Thank you. So, good morning, everybody. Who's up for learning something? Hands up. Okay, who's up for competing on Swiss chocolate? Hands up. Okay. That's it? Okay, well, you still think Belgian chocolate is good. You don't know what you're talking about. Okay, so I want to talk about two things today. First, I want to go back to the basics and look at how to compete on business models. I think many of you might know the business model canvas. That's fine. We're still going to start with the basics. And then in the afternoon session, I will talk about how organizations need to radically change, and I don't just think public organizations, any large institution, to innovate. Because I think large institutions can't innovate today. And I'll tell you what I mean with that. I'll be a little bit more specific, because innovation is just a buzzword, I think. Just like lean is a bit of a buzzword at the moment. So I'm going to talk a little bit about these two books, but a lot about the new stuff that we've seen in companies, what people are struggling with to help them kind of create growth again. Because from small to big, growth is a challenge, in particular when a lot of the emerging markets are saturated, and we really need to come up with new stuff. And that's what I'm trying to do as an entrepreneur. Usually when people introduce me as a consultant, I cringe. So I think consultants these days have a really bad rep, rightfully so, because they should be more facilitators to bring out the ideas in the companies, because people in the companies are the people who know what should be done if they had the right tools and processes. And that's what we're going to talk about, because many companies, in particular large institutions, and maybe Norway as a country, still are stuck in the turkey phenomenon. You know what the turkey phenomenon is? Life looks great. Everything is perfect. But you tend to forget or don't know that others have a different plan for you. And I think disruption is real across the board. I work with pharmaceutical companies, with oil companies, everything. I haven't seen an industry yet that is protected from the turkey phenomenon, okay? And one popular example, of course, is BlackBerry. They were at the top of the world, or we could put Nokia, and bam, over a few years, it went down the drain. And the same thing is happening right now with the pharmaceutical industry, just to take one kind of as an opposition to the traditional tech industry. Or banking, even worse. And then they say, fintech, fintech. Who of you loves your bank? That's the problem, not fintech technology. It's about value propositions and business models, okay? So I think organizations have a hard time reinventing their business models and value propositions, and what they don't realize is that these things expire faster than ever before. And I like to say business models expire like a yogurt in the fridge. And my co-author says, Eve says, Alex, this is good, but at least with a yogurt, you know the expiry date. With business, you don't. So you know what you have to do? You have to constantly innovate. And I'd go even further than what we've heard this morning. You don't just need to say it's going to fail, because it is going to fail. You know how many startups actually make it to a real return, something that grows? 4 out of 100. So if you don't have that kind of ratio in your institution, from 10 ideas, 1 might give you a reasonable return. If you're looking for a home run, you're making $100 billion, euros, or whatever currency you want in revenues, and you want 5% growth, you need to invest in 100. So 4 will succeed. I'll give you the stats this afternoon to create a little bit of suspense. Okay, so an opposite to this is companies like Amazon, okay? Amazon Web Services is just one example of what they've done to grow. Amazon is the company that grew fastest from 0 to $100 billion in revenues because they have a culture of innovation. You cannot invent and pioneer if you cannot accept failure. And Jeff Bezos says in his annual report of 2015, I want Amazon to be the best place in the world to fail. Which CEO have you ever heard say that? or public institution. You do not get innovation without failure. And lean won't prevent failure. Lean will make you more efficient, and we'll see that. If you want home runs, lean alone is not going to do it. You need to accept failure. And then people say, yeah, but failure is not the goal. Learning is the goal. For sure. But without investing in many ideas, you won't get the growth. So it's your choice. You want to be on the left or on the right? Okay, rhetorical question. So we're going to look at the leadership challenge, business model stories, a little bit of a warm-up, and then I'm going to talk about competing on business models. This is our kind of 50 minutes together. Does that work? And then in the afternoon, if you come back, we're going to talk about the groundbreaking stuff we're doing right now. We're co-creating with 3 multinationals metrics to develop business model portfolios. So I can give you a little bit of this already, but I think if institutions, from small to big actually, don't create portfolios of business models, mature businesses and emerging ideas, they will not survive. And yes, hyperbole, American, I'm Swiss. We don't do hyperbole. We're even more extreme than the Norwegians, but you need a portfolio of new ideas of which many will fail. Is like evolution. We need to play more broadly, okay? The organizational structures of the last century just don't work. Leadership challenge, okay. So most CEOs actually know that they're going to be disrupted, and it keeps them awake at night. Yet, what they do is not enough. And it's not because they're not smart. It's what Eric Ries said this morning in this group that was coming together. It's because they're under pressure from the stock market, from activist investors, to focus on the short term. And here's where, the Norwegian Salt Weather, your fund could actually play a gigantic role of bringing real innovation back to institutions, since you are invested, I think, in 4% of all companies of the world, which is insane. Because the problem today is, if you look at the innovation processes, and here I'll use an American expression and not a Swiss one, the innovation processes in most companies still suck. Now you'll say, is he talking about us, not about us? I think people are trying. They're actually trying. A lot of you in the room are trying hard, otherwise you wouldn't be here. But what we need is leadership that goes beyond money and lip services. A CEO who doesn't spend at least 1 to 2 days with innovation is not focused on the future. And most CEOs look at their agenda, you won't see 1 to 2 days focused on innovation. Existing customers, investors, processes, business units, etc., etc. We need to look at the future. Okay, so I think the sound is here not going to work. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw something. See if we can get this to work. Okay, so you're going to see my code. Great. That's okay. So the challenge in most companies, in most institutions actually, is we have 2 worlds. We have the world of improve, where you have existing business models. And I'll just draw this business model canvas. Who of you has ever used the business model canvas? Hands up. Okay, great. Many of you. So here, we're in a world of execution and improvement and the traditional kind of lean, doing better what you already know how to do. And this is great. But the world that most companies are struggling with is in the invent world, where it comes to ideas. Okay, this is supposed to be an idea, where it's all about, don't laugh, come on. It's all about the search process. Here we have linear processes, here we have iterative processes. And the problem is, here, failure is not an option, rightfully so. If you're managing a nuclear plant, nobody wants lean experimentation. Factories need to run. Can you make business plans? Over here, remember the number I gave you? 4 out of 100 ideas actually make it big, which means 96 ideas are not going to be breakthrough growth. Actually, 4 out of 10 are growth, 4 out of 100 are breakthrough growth, which means here we need different processes, different culture, a completely different way of working. And that is the hard part that companies can't manage. You basically need a dual culture, a dual operating system, as some people like to call it, okay? You need to be world-class at both. Lean here is fine. Here, it's a different kind of lean where you will never be able to prevent failure if you really want breakthrough growth, okay? So just quickly, here we talk efficiency innovation. Here we talk sustaining innovation, making a new car model to replace an old one, new BMW, new Mercedes. Doesn't create breakthrough growth. It just allows you to keep up. Over here, you have real growth, okay? So when I say innovation, I'm using it as a buzzword. I should be more precise. Efficiency innovation, sustaining innovation, growth innovation. And they all require a different mindset. Yes, you can apply lean, but creating new growth engines is not about this kind of lean innovation, okay? It's not even about this kind of lean innovation, and it's not about what we always say, innovation, yeah, technology. No, it's about packaging these things in great value propositions that customers want and great business models. And I'm going to focus on the business models in this first session. Ooh, what did happen here? That's kind of embarrassing. Oh. Okay, that was not intended. Okay. And what you need to actually do this is management innovation. That's the hard part. It's not just government organizations that are having a hard time. It's every single company I've seen in the world that has a challenge with creating breakthrough growth, okay? And GE has gone far. I think they've done a great job together with Eric Ries, but even they haven't cracked the code. If there's one company I can say with confidence they cracked the code, it's Amazon, okay? And we can all learn from them. Doesn't matter what industry we're in. If we're in the fishing industry, you can copy their culture, okay? If you're in the oil industry, you can copy their culture. That's what it's about. Okay, now I got to go a bit faster. Business models, okay? I think most of you put your hand up, you know the business model canvas. So I want you to take this as a refresher, and then we're going to do an exercise. So you have this canvas, okay? So it's about who are my customers? What value am I creating for customers? How am I reaching my customers? Through which building blocks? Once I have customers, what kind of relationship do I have? Is it automated? Is it personal? And then how do I make money? And this is what I like to call the front stage. And then over here, we have the backstage, everything I need to make this possible. What are the assets I need, the key resources? What activities do I need to be world-class at? Which partners can leverage my business model? And then I know the cost structure, okay? So 9 building blocks, every single business model, from fishery to oil to banking, whatever. Everybody has a business model. But not everybody makes it explicit, and not everybody, what we're going to do together, thinks about it hard enough to compete beyond products. It's increasingly hard to just do technology and product innovation. Who of you has ever heard of GoPro? Hands up. GoPro has a great product, a great brand, but their business model is a disaster, and that's why they can't keep ahead of the competition. And their stock price went down the drain because they didn't succeed in creating a superior business model, which is what we're going to do together, okay? I want you to think of the business model canvas as a theater. I can't show you the video because we didn't get the sound to work, so I'm just going to show you this drawing. Think of this side as the front stage, like in a theater. Everything that customers see is like the stage that you see in a theater. Everything in the backstage is what I need to make possible behind the curtain in my company, assets, activities, processes, partners, to make the front stage possible. And the front stage and the backstage result in ticket prizes, so value that I capture, and money that it costs me. So this is an equation. Front stage requires backstage, allows me to earn revenues, produces costs. And at the end, business is super simple. Make more money than you spend, right? But doing that in a sustainable way requires a good understanding of business models. That's what we're going to do together. So first, warm-up example. We are going to use Tesla as an example. So you have some stickers. Great, okay? So you're going to map out Tesla's business model. Listen to me first, okay? Listen to me first. So Tesla started in 2008. Most of you might not even know that it wasn't Elon Musk that started Tesla. It was this guy, Eberhard. So we have this sports electric vehicle. We'll start with the Model S at the center. And then we have a couple of things around this business model. So he was replaced by Elon Musk. This is a business model we know now. We have connectivity, right, which is part of the value proposition. We have fast charging stations. Around the US, in Norway, when I say Tesla, you know what I'm talking about because you have many of them. But have you ever thought of the business model? Selling them through shopping malls. They have manufacturing, right? Giga factory, part of this came on later a little bit. We have the powertrain, the technology behind the electric vehicle that Elon Musk started to make accessible to other people, okay? Now, your task is, in 5 minutes, to map out with the stickers, you tear off the stickers and put them into the right box of the business model canvas. You should take maybe 5 minutes. The winning team that gets it right gets access to heaven. Okay? Let's go. 5 minutes. Let's do this together. Okay? This was a warm-up exercise with a little trap. See if you could catch the trap. See how good you were at business model so far. So, basically, we have the car and the connectivity, and if we would want to know more about the value proposition, we'd use a different tool. For that segment, you know, middle class, upper middle class Americans with a higher income. And we would start with the channels, which are the direct channels, the shopping malls, Tesla.com, okay, direct access to customers, which in the US was actually illegal. Another illegal company like Airbnb and all these startups illegal. Okay, then we have the love mark relationship, so it's very emotional, it's direct, okay? And then we have, of course, the revenue stream. So far, so good. And I would hope most of you have it right. Who has it right so far? That was the easy part. Okay. Now comes, if you didn't get this right, okay, we went fast. Now, here comes the little trick here. Well, guess what? Free charging, which it was until now, and that is likely to change, was, or still is, a value proposition. They did it because they wanted to prevent the fear of people that they couldn't charge their car. However, it's also an interface to the customer. Like, you know, Mercedes doesn't have any gas stations. BMW doesn't have any. That costs a ton of money to do. So that is a channel where Tesla interacts with customers on a regular basis. So it's clearly a channel. Who has that one right? A lot less, right? So think hard of your business model. What are the interaction points? Okay, and this is a relatively straightforward, simple business model. Then we have the resources here, which are the assets I have. And the brand is clearly an asset that they build up in lightning speed. No other company has built a global brand so quickly. Some of you might say, yeah, but isn't it a value proposition? It could be both. But it's only when you zoom deeper into the value proposition that you'll call the brand also part of the value proposition. But you could put it in both. But it's definitely an asset, okay? Even accountants start to put value on that. And then we have the activities. What are the key activities you need to perform? So it was innovation, now it's more and more production, okay? And that leads us to the costs. Remember, front stage, backstage. Resources and activities lead to costs. And then they worked with partners, in particular at the beginning, other car companies to get off ground, okay? This is the business to consumer business model. Now you also had blue stickers because at the very beginning, Tesla, could say this is the second business model, was licensing their powertrain to other car manufacturers. And they got a fee for that, and that was definitely not an emotional relationship. That was a cooperation-based relationship with competitors. And they did that at the beginning to get the business off ground, to learn. But once the business was mature enough, Tesla stopped this kind of cooperation. So business models evolve. Business models are a living organism that evolve, and actually they evolve faster than ever before, and they actually die faster than ever before as well, okay? So this today is only the business to consumer. What they then did is they evolved the business model again where Elon Musk acquired one of his other companies, Solar City, and they brought that into the business model. So you need to constantly think how your business model is evolving. I see millions, literally millions of people using the business model canvas, but they fill it out like a checklist. What you really want to understand is, what's your business model story? Is your business model story superior to the business models around you? This is, you could vulgarly call it a template, but think hard about this story and continuously. And I'm going to help you in the next 30 minutes to think a lot more about that story, okay? So here we saw just a glimpse of how Tesla evolved. We could do this for Amazon and we would have a whole portfolio of business models, okay? So if we look at Tesla, last year you've seen they launched the model, the new model. They pre-sold, actually 2 years ago they started to pre-sell. In 1 week, over 350,000 cars. That's amazing, okay? Then if you look at the sales number of last year, they outsold all other electric vehicles. What's more interesting is that they think they're competing against BMW and Mercedes a lot more than these other companies. But now, Tesla doesn't have an innovation problem anymore. What's their real problem? They need to deliver. When you need to deliver 500,000 cars, actually this is not an innovation problem anymore. This is a pure delivery problem, okay? So Tesla matured faster than any other company in the world, from a world-class innovator startup kind of thing to now competing against the world's biggest car companies, not just theoretically, but they have to deliver. So this dichotomy, improve, invent, is extremely hard for large institutions, but it's also hard for startups that evolve to large institutions. You need to play both games. It's called a dual culture, okay? So that's the business model canvas. That allows you to tell the story of how you compete, and we're going to zoom into that. Now, a lot of people still were preoccupied with product, so we said, why don't we give them another tool? So we created the value proposition canvas to zoom in, which means, of course, you need a great value proposition and a great business model to succeed, which was our last book. But what I'm interested in is to address something with you that I still don't see enough companies really understanding. How do you compete on superior business models, not just product and technology? Because that is potentially an ingredient, doesn't have to be. The Nintendo Wii outcompeted everybody else with a crappy product that was worse than every other console on the market, but a superior value proposition and superior business model. Have you seen what Nintendo did just now? What did they launch? Nintendo Labo with cardboard. And again, they're outcompeting others because they think of the world differently. Nintendo is a world-class innovator again. Now, let's focus on competing on business models, and this is going to be very fast. You need to think in groups of 2. I'm going to get you to discuss 7 times, very quickly, okay? Are you ready? It's like going to the business model doctor. I'm going to give you 21 examples, and you have to find out what they have in common. Actually, 7 times 3 examples, okay? So let's start with the first business model, design, and I'm going to give you then another 6. And this will allow you to start competing on business models. Now, I want you to discuss for 20 seconds with your seat neighbor, what do these 3 institutions have in common? iPhone, iPod around Apple when they started, Windows, and marriage. What do these 3 institutions have in common? You have 20 seconds to figure it out. Let's go. Okay. What do they have in common? Let me hear it. High cost of leaving the relationship. Switching costs, right? Switching costs. Okay. Now, let's look at this. This is what I call a business model mechanic. Think of it this way. Here's an example that nobody ever thought of as a business model play. Everybody thought it's a technology play. What people didn't know is when Steve Jobs innocently said, this is the first time we can put 1,000 songs into a pocket. What he actually knew is that he's going to lock you in to his ecosystem, which is clearly a switching cost business model play. So the value proposition was 1,000 songs in a pocket, sold through retail to the mass market. Yes, they needed technology innovation to make that possible, which was the key resource. They acquired some software and technology around that, which would then allow them to lock in people, because once you have 1,000 songs in your pocket, in your iPod, iTunes, it was super hard to switch to another ecosystem. Who of you copied all your music into your iPod, iTunes back in the day? Who did it legally? Less hands up there. Okay. Then came Spotify, and the switching costs were gone. But for a very long time, Apple earned a ton of money on selling iPods again and again. So people think, oh, but didn't they do it to sell music? No, they did it to lock you in and to sell iPods again and again, because you wouldn't change the ecosystem. That's what you call switching costs, okay? That's an incredibly interesting play. Next question, you got 20 seconds. What do Nespresso, coffee pods, machine, press a button, out comes a great espresso, Salesforce, the CRM system, and a fitness chain like Planet Fitness or anything else, what do these three institutions or companies have in common? Discuss for 20 seconds, let's go. Okay. So, what did you come up with? What do they have in common? Subscription. I have never subscribed to Nespresso. They're thinking about it. They haven't done it, so it's not subscription, but we're in the right direction. Recurring revenues, not recurring costs. What you really want is recurring costs for the customer. That's correct. I can tell you, our Nespresso machine at the office and in our house is a really recurring cost. Okay, so so what you want to think of in any business is recurring revenues. So having transactional revenues is great, but recurring revenues is cost of sales once and then getting money and again and again and again. And obviously the traditional model is subscription like newspapers, but then, companies, like Rolls-Royce, they started creating recurring revenues around airplane engines, and then GE took over. So always think, could I create recurring revenues? In particular, in a very transactional business. So this seems like obvious, but I don't see executives either re-examining their existing business model to come up with these things, or when they design new business models, think beyond the shiny product and technology and ask themselves, how am I going to create a superior business model? So the example here is Nespresso, which is a wonderful example of a company that by accident in this case completely disrupted the coffee industry, the high segment market, and turned it into one with recurring revenue. So what did they do? With the machine and the pods, they started selling the machines through retail, getting households to buy the machine. Once the households had the machine in their household, guess what? They were acquired, and when you wanted a coffee, where did you have to go? You had to go to Nespresso. So Nespresso defended that with patents for a long time, and then they would sell you the pods. Because if you wanted a coffee with that machine, you only had one choice, coming back to Nespresso, which created here recurring revenues. So think of it. Think of it. This is a multi-billion-dollar business model play. Before, you could buy coffee, switch the brand the next day, switch the brand the next day. That's why there was so much marketing. Then they turned it into a business where you were locked in. And they defended that with patents. So they turned a transactional industry into one with recurring revenues until the patents expired and everybody could make pods. Now they forgot to reinvent themselves because innovation does not just happen once. Business model innovation once a decade is not enough. It's exactly what they forgot. Now, it sounds simple to say, hey, they forgot it. They were so preoccupied with growth, the numbers looked so great. When you're doing well, it's hard to think of the future. But success is actually the basis for future failure because you get arrogant and you're so focused on squeezing another dime out of your success that you kill everything that looks differently. Now, I think they're back on path and doing some new stuff. Now, let's look at this, okay? You're going to say, subscription. No, it doesn't turn out that way. If we have these three companies or institutions, Financial Times, any kind of travel agency, and Dell back in the day. This is a hard one, right? Discuss for 20 seconds. What do they have in common? Let's go. Who can figure it out? If you get this one, you're good. Okay. Who figured it out? Who figured it out? This is a hard one.
Online sales, maybe? Sales channels? More inventing?
Sorry, can you repeat? Selling. Okay, this was a hard one. Earning revenues before you actually spend. Okay, so traditionally, with hardcore physical stuff, but even with software, you have to spend a lot before you earn. Now let's look at this one, pretty interesting. Before Dell came into the market, we're going to look at Dell. Which company did they disrupt? Many, like Compaq. Anybody still remember Compaq, right? It was a company too one day. Okay, so the business model of PC manufacturers looked like this, okay? So you also need to understand how did some business models disrupt markets. Once you start to understand that, you get good at business model innovation. So PCs were manufactured, which means we had activities. We had also, of course, factories, etc., which means we had a manufacturing cost. Then PCs were shipped either through a sales force to retail or through other channels, but we were selling, and the sales cycle was pretty long, and then we would maybe earn some money if the computers sold. And if they didn't sell, that was completely wasted. But we needed to invest a lot of money into inventory before selling. Then comes Dell and changes the model, and they say, we're going to attack this one here. We're actually going to do this. We're going to take computers and say, we're not going to build first. We're going to sell first. You go to a website, so a lot of people first say, direct. Well, direct sales is just a channel. The business model play here was actually not just selling through a direct channel, but completely changing the supply chain behind. in the backstage. So they would sell computers through direct sales to mass market. You could call it that way even if it was B2B. Okay, mass market. They would earn money. They would have the money in the bank, okay, in the bank. And only then would they start to manufacture. And they made just-in-time manufacturing, supply chain excellence. They made that really big because they were really good at it. So they would only have the costs a lot later. So in their glory days, Dell was earning money on interest from money in the bank from customers before paying suppliers, which is not very fair, right? But the business model is just brilliant, okay? And what happens to inventory depreciation here goes completely away, okay? So pretty spectacular business model change. Now looking back, this stuff always looks easy. But let me remind you of two things. You want to invest in teams in your organization or in startups that try this out. And then the second thing to remind you is that many will fail. That's why you need to invest in 10, and if you're a large corporation, into 100, because only 4 are going to outgrow everybody else on a substantial basis. Again, I'll show you the stats a bit later on. Okay? So what looks obvious looking back is not so obvious when you do it. Even lean startup approaches won't prevent failure. They will make more efficient and faster failure, which is great because failing fast is what innovation today is about. Failing fast and cheaply. Next one, business model mechanic number 4. Skype, Uber, and Netflix. I don't think I have to introduce any of these companies. Who of you has ever used Skype? Okay, who of you has ever used Netflix? Uber? Okay, so these 3 companies, what do they have in common? Let's go. 20 seconds. See if you can figure it out. Okay, let's see. Who figured it out? Difficult common denominator here, huh? There's one aspect that they have in common, but they really changed something. What's different compared to their competitors? Think of it that way. Their traditional competitors. Platforms? Kind of. Channels? Okay. See, you're not yet thinking business model. Platform maybe, channels no. What is really different from their traditional incumbent competitors? No assets. Okay, that's one aspect of it. What's really interesting about it is that they have a game-changing cost structure, and the assets is actually part of that, right? So you could argue both ways. They have a game-changing cost structure in this case because they have no assets. But you'll see increasingly in the world business models coming into a market with a completely different cost structure. And they will destroy industries because they compete with a different business model. The example I'm going to use here is Skype, because when Zenstrom and Fries started out, they actually had a technology, but with the technology, they used it in a different market. Remember, Kazaa, kind of illegal, so they sold that to the Australians. Australians don't care about illegal, so the Swedes kind of do. So they came up with this business model that would disrupt the telecom industry. So the telecom industry back in the day looked like this. You could make calls through the telecom operator's physical channels, which means the network and the sales channels, to a local market. Local market meaning anywhere where the telecom operator had a network, okay? And they would sell minutes or a fixed fee, whatever. Then comes Skype and says, we're going to attack this. they need an infrastructure to offer a service. Okay? Skype came into the market to attack this. They said with peer-to-peer technology that we tested in a different market, in file sharing, we can actually disrupt the telecom industry. And Janus Friis had a history of the telecom industry, so his vision was to offer calls for free. They'd say this is free because we're using technology that doesn't require network, voice over IP, okay? So they would sell calls for free, if you want, to the internet to users globally because they use the internet as a platform, so it's all free, okay? They could do that because Skype was using the internet, the existing infrastructure. Who pays for the internet in this business model? Not Skype. It's not a cost in their backstage, it's the user. So it's basically free for Skype. So what did Skype back then and still today, now that they're owned by Microsoft, where do they invest the money if not in infrastructure? Software, right? Somebody said software. Skype did not have a network. They were spending heavily on software development in the Nordics actually. So this is a software company with the economics of a software company competing against telecom operators and destroying the pricing. So we're just looking at a fraction of Skype's business model because many of you will say, yeah, but they never earned money. Well, it turns out they did earn $1 billion when the numbers were still public, okay? Slightly different than the initial vision. But what I want you to understand is that there are business models out there that are going to disrupt industries with a completely different way of working. So if you've grown up in an industry, you've known the business model of your industry, be sure it's going to look different in 5 to 10 years. And for most senior executives, this is a very hard thing to understand because they've lived with an existing business model for their entire career. But research today shows, there's some reports out there from McKinsey and Bain that show that it's increasingly difficult to be a CEO and manage the same business model because they're expiring all the time. That's why I'm going to talk about business model portfolios in the afternoon, because your business model will inevitably expire and it will be disrupted in one way or another. So just let's live with it and change our institutions and go ahead or die if you want. It's your choice. Number 5. What do these 3 business models have in common? Red Hat Linux, which is a multi-billion-dollar company that built a company based on freely available open source software, Linux, IKEA, which you all know, and Facebook, which you all know. What do these 3 have in common? 20 seconds, let's go. Okay. Who figured it out? The platform is like a catch-all answer. I'll just say platform, you might be right once, okay? You build your own stuff? It goes in that direction, but no, you as a company, who builds the stuff here? The customers, right? Or others. Because in the case of Red Hat Linux, it's not the customers, it's just other people. So what other brilliant business model? I mean, this is the most brilliant thing. Get others to do the work. Why would you not think of that, right? And then people say, yeah, but that's just for the digital world, like Facebook. Well, it turns out IKEA gets a lot of students and young parents around the world to do the work. And they love it, okay? Kind of. Okay, so the one I want you to think of is Facebook, okay? because it will also tell you why some of these platform models have insane valuations, because in some cases it's actually justified. The case of Facebook, it was. Because Facebook is, the value proposition here is, people come to Facebook for their so-called friends, okay? That's users globally. We don't go for the platform. We go for the content, right? So Facebook needs to be sure that the content here, and now I can use this feature, good. Changing friend content, isn't this a cool feature? The changing content is really important, but they don't change the content, it's users globally, okay? And who are the users globally? Well, it's their free workforce. So Facebook has 1.8 billion people working for them for free. So if you use Facebook, you're turning a couple of those Silicon Valley people into billionaires because you work for them for free. Just like some of you work for free for IKEA. And developers worked for free to create an open source software platform on which others could build a company. So I don't think it's completely abstract in every industry to at least reflect on how could we get others to do the work and integrate them into our ecosystem. Okay? Very important. Okay, second last. Allow me just to keep in Swiss time. What do ARM, Airbnb, and McDonald's have in common? ARM is a company that designs microchips, in particular for mobile. Okay, what do ARM, Airbnb, and McDonald's have in common? 20 seconds, let's go. Are you becoming business model experts? Okay, thinking business models. Okay. So what these three have in common, and this is a reflection that I see in particular senior executives don't always make when we're in these business model brainstorming workshops, people don't think about scalability. How scalable is your new business model? So if we take this, Diners Club, first credit card, this is how it worked. So this bunch of smart people said, we're going to offer people over here, salespeople in New York, credits in several restaurants. Okay, salespeople in New York, they could go have lunch with their customers. They would pay a $3 annual fee. Now, Diners Club would have to make sure that they had a database, like a lot of restaurants that would use the credit card. So they had a value proposition to restaurants, which was access to clients and loyalty. And the restaurants would say, that is amazing, we're going to take that and we're going to pay you 7% transaction cut for every single purchase. Who does the work in this business model? The restaurants and the salespeople, once they have the platform in place. So this is a really interesting business model. MasterCard is one of the biggest, the most interesting companies I work with, and they saw this 7%, like they were going nuts. This is business model design. This is obviously also a platform model. The last one I'm going to give you so we stay in time. What do LinkedIn, Nintendo Switch, or for that purpose also PlayStation 4, whatever, and Apple with the iPhone have in common? They all compete on business models. They all have a business model with moats around them. They're not competing on technology. So you could say, yeah, iPhone, good technology, bad technology. It doesn't actually matter because what protects them is the business model. Of course they need to stay ahead of the game, but they don't have to be the best when it comes to the technology. Because if you look at this here, what's really protecting Apple is they have this ecosystem around iOS, okay? They have over 1 billion users using iOS, coming for the phones, the technology, and so on. But that allows them to kind of sell this huge number of users, of people who are willing to spend to attract app developers. So the app developers make the apps, which on the other hand attract the customers again. It's this app ecosystem that is hard to disrupt. You could come up with a great phone. This you can't do overnight. It's practically impossible. That's why you have 2 operating systems in the world. So today, that is worth 26 billion in 2017, 26 billion to app developers. So take this last sheet, and I'm going to finish with this. If you all had one of these up here. You have that? Should have it. I saw it on some sheets. Otherwise, yeah, here. So when you have a business, use this to assess your business model. Are you competing beyond product and price? When you design a business model, use this kind of stuff to ask yourself, am I really competing on business models? If you're competing on products and technology alone, good luck, okay? You're a risk. Think of competing on business models. I'll see you again later on to talk about, let's go beyond this. We're going to talk about competing and becoming invincible with the business model portfolio. I hope you learned something. Thank you very much.